is going on, Peep Squad? Today we're looking at Stand episode 5, which is titled Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which, I don't know if you've noticed, but that's a reference to a 1990 Johnny Depp movie. So, about like drugs and stuff. I haven't seen it, but I'm kind of aware of it. But anyway, I just wanted, before we get started, on Saturday we're going to be talking about WandaVision, so if you're interested in that, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on that. Yeah, overall thoughts on this episode, I've been saying that we needed to see more of Flag in Las Vegas, and this episode definitely delivers on that, so I appreciated that. This episode is probably, as far as changes from the book, I've noticed the most in this episode. Every episode has changes, obviously, but this one's probably the most noticeable in that regard, and we'll get into that in a second. But overall, yeah, I enjoyed the episode. There's some elements I didn't like, but we will talk about them when we get to them. The episode opens in Las Vegas. Last time we saw Dana and Tom leaving Boulder, and we know that both of them have arrived. We know that Judge, I don't remember what the judge's name was, Judge Ferris, or I think it's Ferris. Judge Ferris, she has not arrived yet, we know that. But anyway, Dana has integrated herself in society as a welder working on the Hoover Dam, and we know that that's kind of like where this version of Vegas gets its power, because the grid's down, and so the dam generates power. I don't really know specifically how that works, but I know that it kind of does work. I don't know how dams generate power, but anyway. We hear that since she's arrived, she's been asking around about Randall Flagg. She's been asking around Randall Flagg, and that's got the attention of Julie Lowry as well as Lloyd and Harold. And so I just want to talk about Julie for a bit, because in the original novel and the miniseries, she was only in about the one scene where she meets up with Nick and Tom, and then in the miniseries she was in that scene as well as the scene at the very end. But in the novel she was in that scene as well as there was a scene in Las Vegas where she notices Tom. But yeah, this series has a lot more of her, and I have to say it's maybe not a good thing. She was great in the novel and original miniseries because it was only those couple scenes. But now that we really get to spend more time with her, I'm like, maybe I don't like this character as much as I thought I did. Anyway, yeah, something I've noticed in this episode is that there is a lot of music. Normally, in the past 4 episodes, they've played like music, maybe in the beginning and during the credits, but I've noticed at least 5 times during the this episode, they've played music. I'm not talking like ambiance music, part of the soundtrack. I'm talking like actual like pop songs, which is a little weird. It's just weird, I guess. But anyway, so the camera pans out from the Hoover Dam and it kind of glides over Vegas, which is a cool shot. But as something I didn't notice the first time watching is that I can actually see Tom arriving in Las Vegas, which serves as kind of a transition to him signing up. And so basically when they arrive in Vegas, they are required to sign up and kind of get a job. Yeah, so they're required to sign up, get a job, and sort of work in this society. Something that's a huge difference between this and the novel is that Flagg's New Vegas in the novel is more of like a military state, and it's very, very strict, and in this it just seems to be like absolute chaos. I'm not saying there's necessarily a right or wrong way to do it. They're different visions, and I can appreciate both of them. The lady at the sign-up desk says that she wants to send Tom to the slave cages because she can't really get a whole lot out of him because he's developmentally disabled, as we know from the show. Then one of the guys is like, no, that's not how this works. There are rules in place, and everyone who here is a citizen. Everyone who arrives in Vegas voluntarily is a citizen, automatically by default. So then from there we cut to Lloyd's bedroom, and so this is kind of the part where a lot of things happen that are not YouTube friendly, so I'm just kind of brush over it. Basically we see that in one of the pools they've kind of turned it into a gladiator ring, which I'm making a prediction now that is where Larry is going to end up by episode 8. Larry Underwood, Glenn Bateman, and possibly Ray Bretner are going to end up in that pool gladiator pit. So what I want you to do is subscribe now, and if it turns out to be wrong, you can unsubscribe later. But if not, then stay subscribed. Have it be a little, put some stakes down on the table. Then anyway, we cut to Harold and Nadine. They have gathered the bomb. So as far as the 3 different parts, we're pretty much done with part 1. The novel is split into 3 parts, which is basically arriving to Boulder, and then they're in Boulder setting up the kind of the free zone, and that part is very much focused on Harold and Nadine, which we're basically in the middle of that as of episode 5. And then there's part 3, which is the last stand. And I would say that could be an argument made that this scene with Dana, kind of in this whole episode, all of Dana's scenes could potentially be at the beginning of part 3, but we don't know. We don't have enough information yet as to say whether or not where it fits in this episode's timeline. So that could technically be a jump forward, or it could just be chronologically as it is presented in the show. We don't know yet. Anyway, so we cut to Harold and Nadine. This is right after they killed Teddy Wozniak, I believe his name was. I don't know. And so they are destroying their clothing because it has his blood on it. And they set up the body to make it look like there's a suicide at the amphitheater. Harold arrives there and he acts all shocked. Obviously he killed him, so he's just lying, but I'm doing a pretty good job at it. And then Harold gets the idea of, I'll set up the amphitheater. That's what Teddy would have wanted. And so I'm making another prediction here. So you have to subscribe twice, is what I'm saying. I'm making my prediction that this is where Nadine and Harold are going to set up the bomb in the amphitheater. And so we cut to Nick and Mother Abigail, and Mother Abigail's upset that they sent spies. And so this is a big deviation from the book, because in it they sent spies after Mother Abigail goes missing, and in the show they didn't, and she kind of goes missing because they sent the spies. So it's sort of a switching of the events as they're presented. And something that she mentions, I'm not going to get too deep into this, but something she mentioned is that the Israelites sent spies into Canaan and they had to spend 40 years in the desert because of it. Obviously, that's not true. Them sending spies into Canaan and then spending 40 years in the desert are separate. I'm not going to get into it, but the reason they had to spend 40 extra years in the desert was not because they sent spies into Canaan. Whatever. Anyway, we are back in Lloyd's bedroom, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it, but Dana and Julie are getting a little freaky. That's all I'm going to say. But then Julie mentions Flag's name, and that turns Lloyd way off. He's like, you can't mention his name while we're getting freaky. It messes me up. And so they've stopped right then and there. They just completely stop and they decide to go shopping, which is a little bit weird. I'm not really sure how money and buying and shopping works in this society, especially New Vegas. I'm not really sure how that works. We never really get to see. We just see that they're all decked out in nice clothing and stuff. Lloyd has this red leather jacket and pants, and that's either a Michael Jackson reference. It probably is a Michael Jackson reference, but to me it reminded me of that one. There's an anime or a manga or something, maybe both, where there's this guy, he's like a racer, and he has red leather jacket and pants. I have no idea what that is, but if that rings a bell to you, just comment down below. I'm very uneducated in that field. Yeah, and so basically Tom Cullen has gotten the job of body disposal in New Vegas, and so Julie spots him, and that's something Julie spots him in the novel and the miniseries, but where this episode goes a little different is that she actually approaches him and talks to him. Both in the novel and the miniseries, she does not, although she does notice him. And so now we cut to Nadine. She is having nightmares, and she's starting to think about Larry in sensual ways. The Dark Man's not having any of it, and so he kind of shows up to her in a dream, and he's like, no, you can't do that because you're mine. Kind of the end of that. The next day, Harold and Nadine meet up at school. There's not really anything happens in this scene, although when Harold tries to leave, he runs into Fran, who invites him to dinner, and sort of Fran's plot in this episode is trying to get Harold at her house so that Larry can go break into Harold's house. This was in the novel as well, although in that part, first Fran breaks in to Harold's house, and she kind of finds some things, but then after that, she gets Larry to do it as well. And so they both have information on Harold, and specifically they find his writings. You know, at the end of episode 1, we kind of got a peek into what he was writing about killing Stu Redman, and so Larry actually got a hold of those in the book. In this TV show, it doesn't look like he did, but he got a hold of those, and then he brought it to the committee, and they read it, and Harold got into a lot of trouble. But yeah, anyway, so Stu doesn't know that Fran and Larry are conspiring to break into Harold's house. And back at Nadine's, Joe is gone missing. Turns out he went to Mother Abigail's house and he's playing the piano. I'm a little confused at this because Mother Abigail says she's been talking to Joe. Nadine's like, oh, you mean you've actually got him to speak? And she said, well, there's talking and then there's talking. So this could potentially be a reference to The Shining. That's the Stephen King is that's sort of his way of the Force, kind of communicating and having extra abilities with your mind. Mother Abigail does in the book, she actually says flat out that she does have The Shining. There are a lot of other characters in Stephen King lore that may or may not have it. It's not explicitly stated either way. One thing that is interesting, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but she says that Joe has a muddled mind, and I'm a huge fan of The Wizard of Oz, and one thing that Glinda says is, I'm a little muddled. That's what she says. So that might be a reference to that. It might not be. Who knows? One thing that I did see, I'm not going to take credit for this, one thing I did see some other YouTubers point out is that Mother Abigail's piano is open up so you can see the strings, and that's sort of a reference to her leading the free zone, but you can kind of see what's going on. You can look in the process. She is in control, but you can see it. You can kind of see what's going on. Whereas Randall Flagg, I forgot his name for a second, Randall Flagg is always playing cards, and in cards you want to hide your hand, and so Flagg is very closed off, and you can't really tell what's going on inside his mind. So that's kind of a visualization of their two different leadership styles, I guess you could say. Harold arrives at Fran and Stu's, and he brings over wine, and in the novel he's 17. Assuming he's probably around that age in the show as well, although I'm not entirely sure, it doesn't explicitly say it. And Nadine arrives at Larry's, and she's trying to lose her virginity with him so that Randall Flagg no longer has control over her. Unfortunately, Larry denies it, and then that's pretty much the sealing of Nadine's fate, so to speak. In the show, he kind of just denies it because, but in the novel, he's seeing another woman named Lucy Swan, who seems like she's completely cut out of the show. He's seeing her, and so then when Nadine shows up, that kind of creates a little bit of tension between Lucy and Larry. Anyway, so then Larry goes over to Harold's house, and he breaks in, he goes through the window, and the basement is locked. We later find out that's where Harold keeps all of his equipment. He has cameras, specifically later on in the episode, he puts a camera into Fran and Stu's bedroom, and then he also has one in his house. There's a third screen, although I did not see where that camera was. Maybe we'll find out at some point. And then Harold goes on to talk about this one time that they were at the park in Ogunquit, and Fran managed to get 3 ice cream cones, and she gave one to Harold, although that's the way that Fran remembers it, and apparently it didn't happen that way. Harold wasn't even there. But this just kind of goes back to what I said in the first episode, how no one really likes Harold, even before the Captain trips. And this is kind of an interesting juxtaposition. We see Harold planting the camera in Fran and Stu's house, was just intercut with Larry going through Harold's house, and it kind of cuts back and forth real nicely. Harold uses, for his camera, he uses the eye of a teddy bear. We never see him put it in there, but we see that it's in there at the end of the episode. After that, Harold decides to leave. He leaves early, so that kind of throws Larry and Fran's whole plan off. We find out also this time Mother Abigail is praying. It's apparently, the way it's presented in the show, it seems that Mother Abigail is leaving because of the spies, although in the novel, she got too prideful, and then that's why she left. And then so right as Harold arrives, Larry is still in the house. He knocks over a chess set. Also, he finds Nadine's shirt there as well. He knocks over a chess set, Apparently he puts every piece back, but the knight is facing the wrong direction, and so that kind of tips Harold off. It's really silly because we find out he has a camera later on, so why even add the detail about the chess set? I don't know. We see Linda finally run into Tom. She's kind of talking to him about a bracelet, but it's really, she's just kind of wrote him a note saying to run. I don't know. It's really silly. Like I said, she didn't, in the original, she noticed it was there, but she didn't interact with him for obvious reasons. And Tom can't even read, so yeah, I don't know. Then Dana runs into Flag. We find out that he knows about Judge Ferris, who hasn't arrived in Vegas yet, but he knows she's one of the spies. He knows Dana's one of the spies, but he can't find out the third spy, which is obviously Tom. In the novel, it was because they hypnotized Tom, and so Tom didn't even know he was a spy. He just arrived there, and he was sort of subliminal, and so that was why Randall Flagg couldn't read his mind and find out he was one of the spies. But in the show, it's kind of a little bit vaguer. It's kind of implied that's because he's mentally ill, that he's just completely overlooked. But then Randall Flagg mentions Mr. Garvey, which was the human trafficker in last week's episode. He kind of talks to her about how all the killing is justified. He justifies the killing by saying that the people were like Mr. Garvey, although that's debatable. So all this time we've seen, throughout the entire episode actually, we've seen Dana had a pair of scissors, and so now she takes it out and she stabs Randall Flagg in the neck. In the book, I believe, but also in the original miniseries, she has like a spring-loaded knife, and she stabs him with it, but then he turns it into a banana, which is very funny. Although he doesn't do it here, he actually makes it look like he died, but it was a fake out, obviously. Because there's 4 episodes left, he's not gonna freaking die. Then his eyes turn like cosmic or whatever, and then Dana kills herself. She smashes a bottle of beer in half and she stabs herself in the neck. In all versions, Dana dies in this scene, but normally, I believe it's kind of the similar. In the miniseries, there was like this glass railing that she breaks and she cuts her throat with that. In the book, I believe there was a window she breaks through and she cuts herself. Either way, in this version, it's interesting because Flagg doesn't seem to really care. Original miniseries and book, he is very upset that Dana killed herself because he doesn't know who the third spy is. We see Fran and Stu talk about Harold. Stu isn't really suspecting anything of Harold. He just thinks that Harold's misunderstood. He talks about how it's like he's in love with you, but you're not in love with him, and how it's a complicated situation for everybody involved. But as this is happening, we see that Harold is watching through the teddy bear camera. And he also goes back and he sees that Larry broke into his house as well. The episode ends with Ray Bretner finding out that Mother Abigail has vanished. And then the credits. This is awesome. If you're a fan of The Stand, this is awesome because they play the song "Don't Fear the Reaper" by the Blue Oyster Cult, and that was in the original miniseries, and it's also referenced in the book. So that song is huge for anything related to The Stand. You can't have The Stand if you don't play that song. Anyway, like I said, we're talking about WandaVision tomorrow, so if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell. Also, we have a Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, all that's in the description below, so if you're interested in any of that, click those links, and we also have some podcasts. Links for those are going to be in the description as well. Until next time, peace out.